Disclaimer. This book may contain content that is considered historically inaccurate or culturally insensitive by modern standards. My hope is that by exploring old literature, we will better understand why people of the past thought the way that they did and understand the influences that shape their culture. This video is not intended for young audiences. Hi, I'm Morgan, and today I'm excited to read to you from Out of Door Book, which is the 7th book in a series or collection of books called The Children's Hour, which were published by Houghton Mifflin Co. in 1907. A Night at the Highland Light by Henry David Thoreau. The Highland Lighthouse, where we were staying, is a substantial-looking building of brick painted white and surmounted by an iron cap. Attached to it is the dwelling of the keeper, 1 story high, also of brick and built by government. As we were going to spend the night in a lighthouse, we wished to make the most of so novel an experience, and therefore told our host that we would like to accompany him when he went to light up. At rather early candlelight, he lighted a small Japan lamp, allowing it to smoke rather more than we like on ordinary occasions, and told us to follow him. He led the way first through his bedroom, which was placed nearest to the lighthouse, and then through a long, narrow, covered passageway, between whitewashed walls like a prison entry, into the lower part of the lighthouse, where many great butts of oil were arranged around. Thence we ascended by a winding and open iron stairway, with a steadily increasing scent of oil and lamp smoke, to a trap door in an iron floor, and through this into the lantern. It was a neat building, with everything in apple pie order, and no danger of anything rusting there for want of oil. The light consisted of 15 argand lamps, placed within smooth concave reflectors 21 inches in diameter, and arranged in 2 horizontal circles, one above the other, facing every way excepting directly down the cape. These were surrounded, at a distance of 2 or 3 feet, by large plate-glass windows, which defied the storms, with iron sashes on which rested the iron cap. All the ironwork, except the floor, was painted white, and thus the lighthouse was completed. We walked slowly round in that narrow space as the keeper lighted each lamp in succession, conversing with him at the same moment that many a sailor on the deep witnessed the lighting of the Highland Light. His duty was to fill and trim and light his lamps, and keep bright the reflectors. He filled them every morning, and trimmed them commonly once in the course of the night. He complained of the quality of the oil which was furnished. This house consumes about 800 gallons in a year, which costs not far from $1 a gallon, but perhaps a few lives would be saved if better oil were provided. Another lighthouse keeper said that the same proportion of winter-strained oil was sent to the southernmost lighthouse in the Union as to the most northern. Formerly, when this lighthouse had windows with small and thin panes, a severe storm would sometimes break the glass, and then they were obliged to put up a wooden shutter in haste to save their lives in reflectors, and sometimes in tempests, when the mariner stood most in need of their guidance. They had thus nearly converted the lighthouse into a dark lantern, which emitted only a few feeble rays, and those commonly on the land or lee side. He spoke of the anxiety and sense of responsibility which he felt in cold and stormy nights in the winter, when he knew that many a poor fellow was depending on him, and his lamps burned dimly, the oil being chilled. Sometimes he was obliged to warm the oil in a kettle in his house at midnight, and fill his lamps over again, for he could not have a fire in the lighthouse. It produced such a sweat on the windows. His successor told me that he could not keep too hot a fire in such a case. All this because the oil was poor. A government lighting the mariners on its wintry coast with summer-strained oil, to save expense. That were surely a summer-strained mercy. This keeper's successor, who kindly entertained me the next year, stated that one extremely cold night, when this and all the neighboring lights were burning summer oil, But he had been provident enough to reserve a little winter oil against emergencies. He was waked up with anxiety, and found that his oil was congealed and his lights almost extinguished. And when, after many hours' exertion, he had succeeded in replenishing his reservoirs with winter oil at the wick end, and with difficulty had made them burn, he looked out and found that the other lights in the neighborhood, which were usually visible to him, had gone out, and he heard afterward that the Pamet River and Billingsgate lights also had been extinguished. Our host said that the frost, too, on the windows caused him much trouble, and in sultry summer nights the moths covered them and dimmed his lights. Sometimes even small birds flew against the thick plate glass, and were found on the ground beneath in the morning, with their necks broken. In the spring of 1855 he found 19 small yellow birds, perhaps goldfinches or myrtle birds, thus lying dead around the lighthouse, and sometimes in the fall he had seen where a golden plover had struck the glass in the night, and left the down and the fatty part of its breast on it. Thus he struggled by every method to keep his light shining before men. Surely the lighthouse keeper has a responsible, if an easy office. When his lamp goes out, he goes out, or, at most, only one such accident is pardoned. I thought it a pity that some poor student did not live there to profit by all that light, since he would not rob the mariner. Well, he said, I do sometimes come up here and read the newspaper when they are noisy down below. Think of 15 organ lamps to read the newspaper by, government oil, light enough, perchance, to read the Constitution by. I thought that he should read nothing less than his Bible by that light. I had a classmate who fitted for college by the lamps of a lighthouse, which was more light, we think, than the university afforded. When we had come down and walked a dozen rods from the lighthouse, we found that we could not get the full strength of its light on the narrow strip of land between it and the shore, being too low for the focus, and we saw only so many feeble and rayless stars. But at 40 rods inland we could see to read, though we were still indebted to only one lamp. Each reflector sent forth a separate fan of light. One shone on the windmill, and one in the hollow, while the intervening spaces were in shadow. This light is said to be visible 20 nautical miles and more, by an observer 15 feet above the level of the sea. We could see the revolving light at Race Point, the end of the cape, about 9 miles distant, and also the light on Long Point, at the entrance of Provincetown Harbor, and one of the distant Plymouth Harbor lights across the bay, nearly in a range with the last, like a star in the horizon. The keeper thought that the other Plymouth light was concealed by being exactly in a range with the Long Point light. He told us that the mariner was sometimes led astray by a mackerel fisher's lantern, who was afraid of being run down in the night, or even by a cottager's light, mistaking them for some well-known light on the coast, and, when he discovered his mistake, was wont to curse the prudent fisher or the wakeful cottager without reason. Though it was once declared that Providence placed this mass of clay here on purpose to erect a lighthouse on, the keeper said that the lighthouse should have been erected half a mile farther south, where the coast begins to bend, and where the light could be seen at the same time with the Nauset lights, and distinguished from them. They now talk of building one there. It happens that the present one is more useless now, so near the extremity of the cape, because other lighthouses have since been erected there. Among the many regulations of the lighthouse board, hanging against the wall here, many of them excellent perhaps, if there were a regiment stationed here to attend to them, there is one requiring the keeper to keep an account of the number of vessels which pass his light during the day. But there are 100 vessels in sight at once, steering in all directions, many on the very verge of the horizon, and he must have more eyes than Argus, and be a good deal farther sighted to tell which are passing his light. It is an employment in some respects best suited to the habits of the gulls, which coast up and down here, and circle over the sea. I was told by the next keeper that on the 8th of June following, a particularly clear and beautiful morning, he rose about half an hour before sunrise, and having a little time to spare, for his custom was to extinguish his lights at sunrise, walked down toward the shore to see what he might find. When he got to the edge of the bank, he looked up, and, to his astonishment, saw the sun rising, and already part way above the horizon. Thinking that his clock was wrong, he made haste back, and though it was still too early by the clock, extinguished his lamps, and when he had got through and come down, he looked out the window, and, to his still greater astonishment, saw the sun just where it was before, 2/3 above the horizon. He showed me where its rays fell on the wall across the room. He proceeded to make a fire, and, when he had done, there was the sun still at the same height. Whereupon, not trusting to his own eyes any longer, he called up his wife to look at it, and she saw it also. There were vessels in sight on the ocean, and their crews, too, he said, must have seen it, for its rays fell on them. It remained at that height for about 15 minutes by the clock, and then rose as usual, and nothing else extraordinary happened during that day. Though accustomed to the coast, he had never witnessed nor heard of such a phenomenon before. I suggested that there might have been a cloud in the horizon invisible to him, which rose with the sun, and his clock was only as accurate as the average, or perhaps, as he denied the possibility of this, it was such a looming of the sun as is said to occur at Lake Superior and elsewhere. Sir John Franklin, for instance, says in his narrative that when he was on the shore of the Polar Sea, the horizontal refraction varied so much one morning that the upper limb of the sun twice appeared at the horizon before it finally rose. He certainly must be a son of Aurora, to whom the sun looms, when there are so many millions to whom it glooms rather, who never see it till an hour after it has risen. But it behooves us old staggers to keep our lamps trimmed and burning to the last, and not trust to the sun's looming. This keeper remarked that the center of the flame should be exactly opposite to the center of the reflectors, and that accordingly, if he was not careful to turn down his wicks in the morning, the sun, falling on the reflectors on the south side of the building, would set fire to them like a burning glass in the coldest day, and he would look up at noon and see them all lighted. When your lamp is ready to give light, it is readiest to receive it, and the sun will light it. His successor said that he had never known them to blaze in such a case, but merely to smoke. I saw that this was a place of wonders. In a sea turn or shallow fog, while I was there the next summer, it being clear overhead, the edge of the bank 20 rods distant appeared like a mountain pasture in the horizon. I was completely deceived by it, and I could then understand why mariners sometimes ran ashore in such places, especially in the night, supposing it to be far away, though they could see the land. Once since this, being on a large oyster boat 200 or 300 miles from here, in a dark night, when there was a thin veil of mist on land and water, we came so near to running onto the land before our skipper was aware of it, that the first warning was my hearing the sound of the surf under my elbow. I could almost have jumped ashore, and we were obliged to go about very suddenly to prevent striking. The distant light for which we were steering, supposing it a lighthouse, 5 or 6 miles off, came through the cracks of a fisherman's bunk not more than 6 rods distant. The keeper entertained us handsomely in his solitary little ocean house. He was a man of singular patience and intelligence, who, when our query struck him, rang as clear as a bell in response. The lighthouse lamp, a few feet distant, shone full into my chamber, and made it as bright as day, so I knew exactly how the Highland Light bore all that night, and I was in no danger of being wrecked. Unlike the last, this was as still as a summer night. I thought as I lay there, half awake and half asleep, looking upward through the window at the lights above my head, how many sleepless eyes from far out on the ocean stream, mariners of all nations spinning their yarns through the various watches of the night, were directed toward my couch. And that is the end of A Night at the Highland Light by Henry David Thoreau. I hope that you enjoyed this story and that you're having a great day. Bye!